Hello and welcome once again to another interview with the composer. This time we have Alyx Jones. How are you doing today?
Not bad, not bad.
Good. And why don't you tell us a few of the games that you've worked on so far, just to give us a bit of an introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. There's quite a lot that I'm working on at the moment, and then there's some that quite recently Ignition, Carnage In Space came out, so that's like a kind of rock sci-fi vibe. And then I've been working with Skyfish Studios on Elise Unpainted Memories for quite a while, and then I've got my own project called The Quiet Things that's just pretty much me doing my stuff.
You're saying about Elise, is that kind of an ongoing project? Because you said basically you are still working on it.
Yeah, it's funded by the Microsoft Green Shoots scheme, and so the first round of funding was quite a while ago, and we're the last one that haven't been able to come out yet because of problems with our team and that kind of thing. Just still doing it.
What first got you into writing music for video games?
Oh, I don't even know. I think it was just something that I slowly realised was an option. I've always played games from quite a young age, and I think when I was 12 or 13 I started playing guitar, but I don't know what the point was that I realised. Maybe at university I kind of started putting myself out there as a freelancer and doing bits of work for not much money or with students, and we've got a digital media arts course at the uni that I went to that has some game design, so tried to collaborate with them, and then started going to game jams in Guildford, and then met lots of the Media Molecule lot and sort of more companies. And there's a company called Rocket Desk, which is a hub for everyone in Guildford who wants to rent out a desk, and so it's a really good place to meet people.
So I guess you started off more in the sort of music and composition side of things, and then sort of gravitated towards games afterwards. Is that the case?
Yeah, well, I think I played games on my Game Boy Color and stuff like that, but I never thought I could make a game. So it was never something that I experimented with, and there wasn't subjects at school that really lent itself to that, whereas you can study music, but there wasn't programming and stuff at GCSE, so I took ICT, but that's Microsoft Word.
Yeah. So your uni project, I checked out a bit about it. What was it called again?
The Quiet Things.
Yeah, The Quiet Things. Did you actually design that yourself, or did you just do the music? Or
I designed it all myself. I even had to go at programming it, and it seems to just about work, although apparently I forgot to put colliders on a lot of the walls, so when people tested it out they just bounced off.
But that's interesting.
Yeah, the 3D models were from the asset store, but everything else I kind of put in myself. So there's a couple of models that I made myself, but not very good ones, and then did art bits for books and diary entries and stuff like that.
So it was a uni project, wasn't it? You were being graded on it. So how did you make sure that the audio side of things was going to be sort of, I guess, unique in a way, enough to be able to get a high mark? Might be a boring question, but...
Well, I worked with another voice actor who was a student, and I think she made the game. Without her, it might have been rubbish, and if I just voiced it, it would have been even more rubbish because I don't have the best accent and don't pronunciate things properly. But having her kind of to work around was quite nice as well, because she kind of makes the character different from just being me, and so it's almost even though I know it's about me because I wrote it, that it's a separate story as well. And I really like Life is Strange, and it's like my friends are like, oh, it sounds a bit like that, and I was like, I don't want to be exactly like it, but those kind of like indie guitars in a way, that kind of like vibe,
Okay,
I quite like.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, and like the use of lyrics as well is something that's not madly used in video games, maybe more in like Japanese kind of things, but not in like mainstream AAA games. Only like credit songs tend to have lyrics.
Yeah.
And so I quite liked using that in gameplay because it affects the player, and there's like certain words for like evoke emotions, and like separate from the VO as well, because when someone sings something it makes you feel differently to when they say it.
Comparing your work on Carnage in Space to things like Elise, they're kind of vastly different musical styles. Do you find it easy to jump between styles, or does that take a bit of adjustment to kind of get your head around that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like a very different emotional state that you have to be in before you start writing. So like I try and like spend like one day doing one project rather than like switching between them at lunchtime, because if you're in the zone for something that's like heavy rock and jumping around and stuff, you can't, well, it's quite hard to be then like, oh, this is an emotional like important bit. I think there's lots of little things that are kind of the same, like I use guitar quite a lot, and so I still have that running through my work, but in terms of like atmosphere it's quite different, I guess.
You recently worked on a game called The Iron Flowers, which sounds quite interesting. It's has like a political theme. Does the music reflect that at all, or?
Yeah, we didn't put too much music in it because we didn't want to bombard it, because it's quite a like tough thing. It's about like the Russian Revolution, and then bring in the same like themes and comparing them to like a modern day. So we used like an actual like Russian revolutionary song, but it was a collaborative project between myself and another composer and a voice actor as like a uni project as well. So we kind of shared all the work a lot. So I think it's more like atmospheric-y sound design. Like I wouldn't say it's like very melodic. It's more like room tones and building kind of feelings up, rather than as so much like music. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I think Command and Conquer Red Alert 3 did a similar thing with like the Russian sort of traditional revolutionary song. But they made it like, I think they added like electric guitars to it and stuff like that. Yeah. So is it kind of a similar idea where you've taken that and sort of changed it in a way?
Yeah, we did try making it into kind of more of a piano like lullaby-ish piece that was playing in one of the rooms, but I think we didn't put it in the final one, it was just in the demo. But it didn't necessarily work right, and we didn't want the Russian bit to be too strong, because it was more about how the politics hasn't changed wherever in time you are. It's just the same things happening again, but it didn't really matter in our like future part of the game where it was, because we imagined that the world would be much different in terms of like where countries are and what race was and things like that.
So can you tell us a bit about the Sound Architect and your work with them? Is it like an organisation?
Yeah, so we're mostly a website, and we cover kind of sound, music, voice acting. I mostly look at game stuff, but other guys do like movies and theatre things and stuff like that. But I think I met Sam Hughes, who runs the Sound Architect, at Game Music Connect years ago on the very first one that was in London, and we stayed till like really late at the pub talking about it, and then eventually went on to join them. So I was head writer for quite a while, and recently I've had so much going on that I've had to like step down a little bit just to write in articles rather than managing everyone. But we go to lots of events like EGX or the BAFTAs, and I think maybe some is going to GDC this year, but it's expensive for us to get over there because we're all UK based. I think there's one person in America maybe. But yeah, it's all run online, mostly on Slack. But we do interviews as well with people the same as this. So I interview them, yeah. It's a really good resource though.
I read on there that you're working on, or you have worked on Oculus Rift game. Is that Wanderift?
Oh yeah, that was ages ago.
All right, it's been released now then.
Well, it was just like a demo project, and I put it up for like games, like mini festival thing called Zealous X. But I only got shortlisted. I didn't get around to the final bit. But it was literally just like experimenting with VR and not having gameplay, because it was kind of before everything took off quite so much. So nowadays you'd just be like, well, it's just wandering around a scene in Unity.
Are there any differences in working like with VR in terms of designing the music for it that you found?
Yeah, so when I did the VR project, I kind of inserted the music into like sections as like sound objects in the location, because you have this thing between whether you want it attached to the headphones at all times, so like the music never pans, whereas when you're looking around, if you've got things in real 3D space, you want it to like mix it differently. So I played around with that quite a lot and had like different like vocal like bits around, and so when you're like near a certain point, you have like more of certain harmonies or whatever, and then if you're stood like right in the center point, I did a thing with what's it even called? I can't remember. Like binaural beats. So like if your head's like in the right position, you get like the beating effect between like the two frequencies, which was quite cool.
Yeah, nice. Did you ever play that VR game Kitchen? If you have a, because well, I'm not massively into VR, but like when it first came out, everyone was kind of raving about this horror game Kitchen, where you're kind of strapped to a chair. Just wondered if you'd played it.
I'm like not massively into horror stuff because I am a bit of a coward, so I probably wouldn't have braved it.
So, as you said, you've attended quite a fair few game jams. What can you tell us about composing pieces in such a short space of time and the process of doing that?
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised like how much you can get done compared to like my normal workflow when I'm not on such a tight deadline as a day. But it's a really creative space as well, because it doesn't really matter if it's good or not, so there's no pressure of like loads of people hearing it unless you want them to, but you have like the teams who can always give you feedback as well, so it's quite nice to have that like immediate, oh, this bit's working, this bit's not, or like, yeah, it's really good. It's quite hard composing an environment where there's lots of people sat around at desks, because normally I'm at home, so there's not other people around, and so I've just got this tiny little MIDI keyboard and my MacBook, and then sometimes record bits in, depends. But like if like in Guildford there's lots of audio people, it's kind of become a thing now, so we kind of work together on music and sound design, so it's really nice to have lots of people on that side of it, and you have really legit feedback from them because they know what they're talking about as well.
Yeah,
when you're on your own in a team, or when you go to other game jams, you might be like the only audio person, so you end up doing like lots of work for lots of different teams, and that's quite cool because you get your sound on loads of different games on like over a weekend. But it's not as bad as you might think.
Okay. What in your opinion, should I say, what do you think the reason is that in places like Japan, for instance, we have like quite a large number of female composers, whereas here it's kind of like every single massive composer is male? Do you think there's a particular reason for that? Or?
Yeah, I can't say that I know enough about like Japanese culture or anything to really comment on their side of things, but I can only talk from my own personal experience and like growing up and taking GCSEs and stuff like that. Like there's a really basic thing, as it's only very recently that they've even put female composers on the curriculum, which is quite weird, and you wouldn't even think about it. Like I didn't think about it until they mentioned it, and I was like, huh, that's weird. So I wonder whether it's just that without like role models and being encouraged to do certain things, you just kind of veer off into a different career direction because you can see yourself in it more, but that's not necessarily true because, I mean, I didn't really take GCSE music, and I was a bit of a tomboy anyway, so I got into more male things and like played electric guitar and got into rock bands and all that kind of stuff. But it's not like a rule for everyone. It's just some people may be more put off if it's not as easily available, maybe.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer, actually. I've never thought of it that way before. Yeah. What is your favourite project that you've worked on and why?
It's a bit egotistical, but I really like the one where it's just me because I can do whatever I want and like explore things that are deeper, and you don't have to worry about people like judging it as much because you can pretty much put anything out there. Like I really sorry, Karen.
No, you carry on, it's fine.
There's the guy William Pugh who did the Stanley Parable, and he did like a talk at EGX where he had like a twine game, but it was just about how he was like not enjoying his career and having to do the same things over and over again, and it was quite like depressing. But it's not the kind of thing that you really notice, or like people don't make games so much, or they're not as popular about things that are actually quite dark. Like, obviously there's like the extreme horror side, but not like the kind of more realistic kind of dullness of some parts of life, or like mental health illness and those kind of things. Like, I'm quite interested in exploring them in games and how people relate to them and how it could even help them, even though it's not like a positive spin on it.
So tell us about the mental health aspect of the game you worked on.
Yeah, so I like had quite a, I don't know what the word is, traumatic upbringing. Like, I ended up being homeless when I was a teenager, and like went through the foster care system a bit, and was in like youth hostels. And kind of, if you've played through the game, there's obviously a bit that kind of like deals with self-harm and suicide and those kind of things. And I don't think, like, they might be used slightly as topics in some games, but it's not like the central theme, if that makes sense. And
Sure.
Sometimes with like Chloe from Life is Strange, for example, she has like a slightly bratty personality, but I related to it a lot because of like how she is. And so it's interesting how people perceive when you display things as they might be in real life, kind of whether they like get along with them or judge them in a certain way, or like for all the people that are going through it who actually relate to it, and then they're like, oh, I'm not the only person doing this. And like things like, I don't know, like, because mine was all based off diary entries that I wrote when I was a teenager, and I was like really religious about keeping it, but I didn't put everything in the game and had to like take out certain things that would have like mentioned people and stuff like that. But that's real, if that makes sense. So it is, in certain ways, it's kind of like almost like a documentary style game, but the kind of path you take is more rigid. But I don't know of any other games that do similar things, or like maybe like museum kind of projects might use like real life examples and stuff like that, but as intensely as like following someone's like day-to-day life struggling with things like that is quite, I don't know, it's quite intense to play, and I think it's quite effective as well though.
Do you think there are any other games that do that use the idea of mental health in good ways, like maybe not necessarily similar ways to your own game?
Yeah, I don't really know. Like, I struggled a little bit when I was trying to research for my project, and there's things like Depression Quest that are well known, and I think they have a value, but it doesn't let people like have their own options, because like when I suffered with depression, it didn't stop me doing things, and whereas like in Depression Quest you have the options are like blanked out, so you can't select things that would be like positive things to do with your day or whatever, and I found it slightly off-putting, I guess, but I still played through the game and it has an impact anyway. But yeah, I think there might have been like another way of doing it that would have worked, but I don't know, I'm not the developer.
Sure.
Oh, there's like some of the war games you can deal with like players like refugees. I can't remember what it's called.
This War of Mine.
Yeah, that's quite good. And like it's not mental health, but it shows like a kind of different perspective and making difficult decisions compared to like the Call of Duty, for example. But the answer to that is probably not.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions that I've got for you. Thanks very much for coming on and speaking to me. This has been Alyx Jones, and I'll put all her details in the description below if you want to check her out. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.